So my background is from the world of sport. Was a professional kayaker. So I did that for the best part of, I was a professional athlete for about 15 years, and I won six world championship gold medals, three European championships, and I competed at two Olympic Games, the Sydney Olympics and the Beijing Olympics. So what I do now is all about taking those lessons from the world of sport, bringing them to the workplace. Learned many invaluable life lessons, very much all about high performance. How do you reach the highest level and sustain that? How do you manage pressure in challenging environments? I learned what it means to be part of an effective and really high performing team. What a dysfunctional team also looks like. I learned from really inspirational leaders. So a lot of lessons that I take from the world of sport and then relate them back to the workplace, basically helping leaders and teams to develop the skills, the actions, and the behaviors to be high performing. So that's what I do as a keynote speaker. But I do wear three hats in my working life, and one is obviously as an inspirational speaker. I'm also an accredited high performance coach. So I work very much one to one with leaders, helping them on the same topics. And also I founded a training consultancy called Beyond the Barriers. So I work with teams or with leaders and do training, learning and development, leadership development. I'm a team coach. So that's often something that I get asked to do as well as a speaker. When there's a big conference, I was in Atlanta last month and they asked me to do a keynote followed by a 2 hour workshop for the group, or sometimes it's a breakout session. So with that hat on of leadership training development, so I do that as well as just the keynote speech. So those are the three. But everything, whether I'm working one to a group of 10 or one to 1,000, it's all about high performance, leadership, resilience, taking those lessons, bringing them to the workplace. But having that training consultancy and working closely with clients on a regular basis has really helped me to not just rely on my own experience as an athlete, but also I've done so many trainings and accreditations and my own personal development so that I'm up to date with all the latest developments in the world of learning and development. So that was a long answer to what do I do, starting with the basics. So yeah, kayaking in England is not a really big sport, and it's not one that you do at school, and it's not one that I was going, Mom, please take me kayaking. So I, as a young child, did lots of different sports. My parents, well, my mum in particular, was often in getting me to try different sports in the summer holidays, off school holidays. Here, do a week of tennis camp, week of this, and she just picked up a leaflet saying, "Come and try kayaking." And my brother and I went along. We did it for a week. We loved it. It was lucky because we were on the River Thames and it was the summer and the weather was great because it can be really cold and miserable on the River Thames. But it was wonderful weather. We were splashing about in the kayaks and I really enjoyed it. And so we did a trial membership at the club, and this is something I talk about often in Q&A, because I was really lucky because it was actually a really brilliant club. It was one of the best in the country at the time, and I was surrounded by inspirational people, other athletes, younger athletes, older athletes who were on the Great Britain team, going off to compete at the Olympics, the World Championships. And that's where I got well, I'd already wanted to be, I knew about the Olympics and wanted to be an Olympian. But when I got to this club and realized that everyone else, not everyone else, but there were people there who were doing that, who were going off to the Olympics, going to the World Championships, winning medals, I was like, wow, this is possible. So that's where the belief that this could really happen began. Yeah. Oh, most memorable race. So I won six world championships, and I get asked this a lot, this question, what's your most the most memorable one will be one of the wins for sure. And I won six gold medals, and it's often difficult to decide which one is the most special. I get asked a lot. But I don't know how much you know of my story, but um, in the peak of my career, I was diagnosed with an illness called chronic fatigue syndrome, and I was out of the sport for 2 years, and I was told I would never race again. And to cut a long story short, did recover from that, came back, and I went on to win the World Championships 12 months after starting, like recovering from the illness. Um, and the mental and emotional battle to get back to that level in my sport and to win that race was huge. And so not just the physical challenge of recovering, getting back to speed and fitness, but the mental battle of, having lost confidence in myself, being told I'd never race again, building that back up was really big. And so to win that race quite convincingly, it was over a minute that I won that 2.5 hour race. Was really, really memorable and special. So yeah, the race itself probably wasn't, it didn't have any significant incidents in it, but what it meant to me was really special, and that's why it's memorable.
Mhm.
But basically, that's what my keynotes are all about. What are the lessons that I take from my experiences into the workplace? And I go in lots of different directions with this. And as you've probably read on my bio, I have different topics. The most popular topic is what I call getting the competitive edge with the winning mindset. And so for me, your mindset is what determines your success. It's really, really simple for me. That is huge. And so a big part of what I'm passionate about, and which is why I went into leadership coaching rather than sports coaching, is that I'm passionate about the psychology of performance and how that relates back to the business world. I start with an extraordinary goal. That was absolutely key. So I wanted to become an Olympian and a marathon kayak racing world champion, which there was no other British female kayaker had ever won the world championships. There had been male world champions, not many. In fact, maybe only two, but no female British world champions. And so the point was that this was about, asking, why not me? And, this wasn't about following in the footsteps of others. This was about believing in myself and what was possible. And so I talk about extraordinary goals and aiming high, pushing boundaries. And I get asked to talk about that a lot because I think sometimes people are afraid to aim high, to really dream big in case we fail. But also a lot of sales teams who have already reached a great level, it's about pushing even harder and even higher. So that's a really important message about not being afraid to dream really big. Following off from the back of that, I worked with a sports psychologist for many years, and one of the big things that I learned lots of things, but one of the things that I talk about in my keynotes is visualization. So having talked about a goal or a dream, a vision, I then bring that to life with visualization. So I used to use that a lot, constantly visualizing myself on the podium, winning the world championships, in the Olympic kit, being an Olympian, but also visualizing in great detail the different components of my race, seeing it from start to finish, how I felt, all of the details, using all of my senses. And quite often in keynotes, I will, depending on what topic we're doing and if the audience they think will be receptive to that, but I'll often do a visualization with the audience. So I'll literally do a guided visualization for it's like about 3 minutes long. And it might be on a specific something very specific, like if it's a sales team, we might visualize having a sales conversation, and so literally going through how I feel before I enter the room, how I want to feel, building my confidence. What does that feel like? What does that look like? Imagining what I'm saying to myself. And then I walk into the room and I have this conversation and I see it play out, and we bring it to life for them. Or it might be about hitting a sales target and we see the outcome and we see ourselves smashing targets and visualizing what can happen. Because if you can't imagine it, then you can't achieve it. So you've got to be able to see it in your mind's eye, and because the brain doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real life one. So sometimes I take people through that, and that's really inspiring for people because they're actually bringing to life the goal, the things they want to achieve in their mind's eye, and then that helps you to believe that it really can happen. So that's something that I do with teams a lot. Um, so whilst I won 5 of my 6 world championships in the individual kayak in a K1, we call it. I also won one in the doubles, and I competed at the Olympics once in the singles and once in the doubles. But I'm not in a traditional team sport like football or rugby or um, netball, hockey, things like that. However, still had a team because there was the physio, the nutritionist, the coach, the sports psychologist. There's this whole team behind me. And so I talk a lot about, and I think this is really important for a lot of companies come to me and say that they have silos and they have teams, cross-functional teams, and they're not collaborating, they're not talking to each other. And that's, kind of what I had. We had, the nutrition and the coach and the strength and conditioning and the sports psychologist, and they're different departments essentially. And so how do we all collaborate? And I talk about the importance of the shared goal, that extraordinary goal, not being just my goal. It wasn't just me winning the world championships. That was our goal. And that's what creates a shared sense of purpose. So the power of that, recognizing that the best teams work not just side by side, but together, aligned, collaborating, communicating, reinforcing each other's efforts, recognizing that we all have different strengths. We all bring different things to the party. We all are clear on our role and how we individually contribute to the end goal. So that piece around teamwork is really important message, which I think is really valuable. In some of my talks, I do focus a lot on teams, and I can go into that in a little bit more detail. So I first started with the motivational speaking right when I was still competing because it was my sponsors who got me into it. They asked me when I was still racing to come to one of it was a sales conference, and can you come and speak? I'd never done any speaking before, so I was really nervous. But I really enjoyed it. And as I mentioned earlier, what really fascinates me is the psychology of performance. And so whilst I enjoyed being on stage, when I did that first speech, it really made me think about, okay, here's my story, and I could tell it in a very chronological order. Back then, I didn't really go into as much depth as I do now on how did all that happen. I was kind of just telling a story about, and I won this and this, I had the team, and now obviously I go in, I've reflected and thought so much more about what was my mindset and what was it that my coach did that really helped to align the team, to get the team on board, taking ownership. How did we give each other feedback? All of these things that I started to learn as a training consultant, I was trying to reflect on my own experience, and that is what I was fascinated about. The other reason I love this is that I struggled initially with the mental game, and that's why I worked with a sports psychologist for so long. So understanding the human brain and why we behave in the way we do, that's what just fascinates me. I love understanding people, trying to get the best out of people. And I guess when I was competing as an athlete, it was very much about me. It was all about my goal, which became the team goal. But now what really is rewarding for me is working to help others. I love, finishing a speech, going to mingle with the audience, hearing they all, when they come up to me and say, "Oh, that was great." My question is always, "So what are you taking away? What are you going to do?" I'm really curious to know what is it that I talked about that you're going to take away and you're going to implement? How is that going to help you? And I wanted to get into the conversation of, okay, and so how are you going to implement that? And that just really excites me. And then when people email me and say, I've done this as a result of what I heard you talk about, or, in the one-to-one coaching, I love seeing that progress of the people I work with, seeing them implement the stuff that we've talked about. So I find that really rewarding. So that's where I got into that.
Mhm.
So I guess the winning mindset is a big thing that I speak about a lot, and that's sort of peppered throughout. I guess I have about four main topics, but they're all underlying themes of resilience and performance. But high performance, winning mindset, reaching the highest level, sustaining success is a big one because obviously I didn't just reach the top, I stayed there. And that's a popular topic with the companies who are already doing really well. They're number one in the industry, but they've got competitors chasing them. So that's or sales teams who are like, you know what, we had an amazing year last year, but we want them to do even more. And the sales guys are going, but we've already reached our highest level. How do we go even better than that? How do we reach the next level? We've already given it everything we can. So that is something that I talk about a lot. So sustaining success, understanding that we can't be complacent. I talk about constant and never-ending improvement. And that's, the winning mindset assumes there's always room for improvement. So for me, that's about reflecting on our performance, whether it was good. People, if they're inclined to, are more likely to reflect on a bad performance and look for what did we do wrong, what did we learn, and that's really important, something I talk about. But what people in business are less inclined to do is look at what they did well and why. At the end of the last quarter, we hit our targets, and they're like, "Yeah, brilliant, move on." No, let's stop and think about what was great, why was it great, what can we learn from that? How can we do more of it? How can we keep improving? So yeah, it's all about constant improvement. It's about high performance. It's about cohesive teams. It's about resilience, bouncing back, managing pressure, learning from mistakes and adversity. Those are, I guess, the buzzwords. They're both very different because one was, it was me and our team success, and it's us achieving. And, for me, achieving goals that I dreamt about since I was 9 years old. And so when you finally do that, and all the effort and the hard work and the hours and the dedication and the disappointment, all of that comes to fruition, it's super rewarding. And there's nothing quite like that high that you get from that. There really isn't. And I'd be lying if I said, I get that high from, seeing someone else achieve. Um, and what I loved about sport, and one of the things that I that comes close to it now, I loved being on the start line and the adrenaline and the anticipation and, getting ready for this big performance. And I get that a little bit when I go on stage. But in terms of the rewarding, it's different. When I feel this sense of reward for an achievement with my clients, it's their success. I've helped them, but they've done it. When I work closely with a team or one-to-one coaching, or, people email me after a speech, it's they've taken the action. Like, I've guided them, I've lit the touch paper, given them some tools, but they're the ones who have to do the work. So it's really their success. I can't take credit for it. I mean, I've helped them, and I love to hear the success stories. And I do find, and that's what motivates me now. But it's just very different to what I did before. It was very much a personal achievement as opposed to someone else's achievement. But they're both rewarding, just different. Projects that I'm working on, well, I guess, in the world of speaking, it's always evolving. But I am trying to do more. My goal is to do more of the, like I mentioned earlier, I was working with a big pharma company. And so we did a keynote and then followed by the 2-hour workshop. And I really love that. And I'd love to do more of that, because what that allows me to do is to bring a theme to life with my story, give them obviously some tangible takeaways, things that they can take away and apply immediately. That's a given in my speech. But then being able to do a 2-hour workshop, we can really dive into some depth, and we can spend some time, and we can pause, and we can have some more discussions, and we can do a bit of breakout, and I can feed back from the audience. What did they discuss? And, that workshop style is what really allows us to dive in a bit deeper and really help them think about, okay, how does this really apply in my world? So that's what I'm I'm looking to do more of actually. I mean, I'll always do the speaking, but the more I can add that on, I feel like I can add so much more value by going a bit deeper. So that's something that I'm focused on. Um, I mean, I in my work with um the sort of the training side, the coaching side, there's always projects, but they're very much client focused. So, depending on which client I'm working with, it might be we're developing a new program for them around or working with a new team. But that's changing and that's, relevant to each client as opposed. Yeah, I think actually it's more difficult to stay successful. Well, yeah, it's really hard to get to the top in the first place. But what's really hard about staying there is the pressure is really tough. So once you're already at the highest level, then you've got people expecting you to perform next time. So the pressure to perform is hard. So being able to stay focused on what's important, being able to stay focused on what you can control, being able to stay focused on your performance rather than competitor. It's a mental game. But like I said earlier, the complacency can set in and think, great, that's it. We've got it sorted. We've got the formula. We know how to achieve now, but it doesn't work like that. You've got to be constantly reflecting. What got us here won't necessarily keep us here. How do we stay ahead of the competition now that we're here? The motivation, you've won it once. How is the motivation still really high to go again? So I think that it's actually really difficult to stay there. So that's probably the thing that I'm really proud of actually, that was undefeated in marathon kayaking for 10 years. Well, no, 99 to 2007. So for 8 years. Um, so yeah, I think that's the big, well, they're both really hard. So I absolutely tell my story, but what I spend a lot of time on, and I really pride myself on this, and I get a lot of feedback on this, is that I spend a lot of time trying to understand the client. I really want to understand their world, their language, what's going on for them, getting examples from them. So if I'm talking about a sales team, then I want to know, are they face to face? Are these people? So I can give an example and I can relate it back to, so if I'm talking about preparation, the really key part of, performing well is the preparation. So I'm then wanting to know what is there. So in my briefing call, I'm trying to understand what is your preparation for the sales team? Is it researching the client? Is it understanding your, really getting clear on your key messages? Is it about understanding what our value proposition is? I want to know what preparation means for them so that I can say, this was my preparation. It was the training. It was the weight training, the training in the gym, the water, the mental training. And for you, this is the researching the client. It's the X, it's the Y. So I do use not throughout the whole thing because it would get tedious, but in certain elements, I'm relating it back to their world so that they can put two and two together and in the way that I'm intending. So absolutely, yeah. As much as I can, I try to use language that, if there's buzzwords of the organization, their values, I'm trying to pepper my speech with that kind of content so that it really resonates with them. What I don't want to ever do is just tell my story and then they go, oh, isn't she inspiring? But how does that relate to us? I want them to go, oh, I get it. Oh, when she talks about, reflecting and reviewing performance, oh, that's where I can do that. That's where I should be doing that. So absolutely, I'm trying to build the bridge.